And by the way, this is a tangent. In first service, this light bulb popped out. We had 3 light bulbs pop out this morning. This one and then a couple in the back. It's like paparazzi. And I don't know what I think. Do I like it darker or lighter? So if you see these light bulbs burnt out, I don't know what the deal is, but all of a sudden, over the last month or so, poof, 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 all over the room. Has anybody noticed how many dark bulbs we've had at different Sundays? Beth Messiah too, yeah. And it's really bad, but I guess they're all going at the same time. So Labor Day we know is a day to kind of celebrate the American worker. And I think most of us have a pretty good sense of that. It's a day that, it started with a mass walkout in New York City. 10,000 people walked out unpaid to make a statement to say, take care of American workers. And this is back in the 1880s. All the way till today. So this is a day that we remember different things that have happened with the American worker in mind. The 40-hour work week, the 5-day work week, things like that we can look back and say, boy, that has made our work experience a little more manageable for us. Any of us mind a 40-hour work week? Should we go back to the 6-day work week? And we all like that. Really, truly, if we boil it down, Labor Day is a day of accountability. In a lot of ways, it's accountability for the American worker. But there's a component of Labor Day that's an accountability day. It's different than most of their holidays. When we think of, Christmas, I don't think the average person thinks of accountability. But Labor Day is a day to remember and to measure accountability for the American worker. I know today there's political undertones for or against, and I want to stay away from that stuff. We're a church, everybody has their opinions on that. But we recognize the one thing that Labor Day is, in fact, there's a connection to accountability. And we know as believers, because I know all of you know of the Lord in here, and we know as believers that being accountable is very much a biblical concept. True? Anybody disagree with that? We can move forward. I just want to look at some verses to center us on this. Go ahead, Brad. Let's look at the first one. It's built into our relationship. Now, whether we know Jesus or not, accountability is an important thing. Whether we know the Lord or not, everybody is going to be accountable at some point. By the way, accountability isn't just for believers, is it? We're accountable to our laws. I think church has a different perspective, or God's people has a different perspective on it. But Romans 14:12, so then each of us will give an account of himself to God. And each one. Hebrews 13:17, obey your leaders and submit to them. They have to watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. This is important. Jeremiah 17:10, I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways. There's an accountability piece to this. Hebrews 4, and there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. So accountability is really woven in. We could probably, I can't imagine how many verses we could find in accountability in the Bible, but there would be a lot. Accountability is woven into who we are as believers. We can't have it. Jesus himself was the most accountable man that ever lived. He was accountable all the way to death. Right? His whole life, he never sinned. He was accountable to always doing these things the right way. So accountability is truly woven in. And we know that Jesus walked out. He demonstrated holding others accountable as well. Let's look at some of these examples. This is just a few of them. Go ahead, Brad. Matthew 8, during the storm. Oh, you have little faith. Where's your faith in this, guys? There's a storm. They had to wake him up, if you remember the story. Martha worked instead of listening. So he had to say, hey, you know what? I'm only here for a little while. You'd want to listen to me instead of work right now. Do you ever know anybody that spent all their time in church working, that they never stopped to wait on the Lord during services? You ever know anybody like that? That's what Jesus was saying. He's saying, hey, Martha, slow down. It's not all about the work. I'm only here for a little bit. Spend time listening to me. Peter cuts the ear off a man. They're coming to take Jesus away. Peter takes out his sword, lops the guy's ear off. I feel bad for that guy. I really do feel bad for the guy. We know the man who his ear is cut off. I think his name is Malchus, and he was a slave of the high priest. So the high priest is coming and his slave's with him. And poor Malchus gets his ear cut off. He's a slave. At least cut off the high priest's ear, And I was talking to my wife about this yesterday. We were just talking about it, and she said, he was the one guy who got to experience Jesus' touch. That's true. He got his ear cut off. Jesus put it back, healed it. That's not a bad swap, is it? Maybe he came out ahead as a slave. At first I was thinking, this poor guy, and then I'm thinking, man, he may have been the one blessed guy there. There's other ones. Mark 10, disciples holding children from Jesus. He had to correct them. Jesus said, hey. There was an accountability aspect when he corrected them. The last one there, Galatians 2, Peter and his dietary issues. This is really between Paul and Peter. Paul had made the accountability discussion with Peter. So we know that we know in the Word there's accountability everywhere. We know that Jesus was accountable. We know that he held people accountable. Accountability is everything. It's woven into who we are as believers. But yet, as believers, it's so hard sometimes to be part of an accountability experience. I know a lot of believers that want anything to do with accountability. They want to live by the willy-nilly aspect in life, by the seat of their pants, just living out there. You know those people? Why is it that believers sometimes such have a hard time being accountable? I came up with some theories, some guesses as to why some may. Maybe it's embarrassment. If somebody would come to me and tell me something I'm doing wrong, I might be embarrassed. If I went to you and said, hey, I got an idea if you want to, might help you do something more differently or maybe a little better, you might feel embarrassed. I don't know. Maybe that's one reason some people don't like dealing with accountability. Or maybe some people feel as though they're giving up their individuality. Oh, I just have to do what they tell me. Maybe they think it's an individuality thing. I know this one's true. I've actually heard this from people. Accountability can be challenging because it can focus on the negative. If I come to you and I say, hey, I noticed you got something going on in your life, and I think there may be a better way to do it. I want to help you get through that. Let's sort of look at a different way of doing what you're doing. Maybe leave that behind. That can seem very negative. And sometimes people develop accountability and they only think of the negative that they're doing. They only focus on what's wrong. They don't remember God's grace. I'm bad. What about the fact that Jesus loved you too? God called you too. Accountability can turn into a negative network. You know what I'm talking about? You ever known where it's only focusing on bad? And they forget about God's grace. What's more important, the bad or the grace? The grace! What about this? Maybe it's hard for some people because of the person who's telling. Maybe there's no relationship with them. If a stranger walks up to you and says, hey, I want to tell you something that you may be able to improve in. A stranger, if they say, I can help you with something you can improve in, what are you going to say to them? I don't want to know. Every now that I hear this is and my dad I'm sure has heard this, I hear this here from visitors at Grace, and also I'll say from Beth Messiah, a visitor, a first-timer will come in and say, you know what, you need to change your service. Let me tell you how you got to do things better. Oh, which is code for I don't care. And I'll say, I don't care. I don't know you. That's actually what I say. I don't know you. I don't care what you have to say. Sometimes I won't let them finish the words in their sentence. Let me give you some tips. I don't want your tips. If we don't have a relationship with somebody, it's very difficult to hear. I had gone to Bible college and I was brand spanking new. I was 18 years old, and I got there for freshman week, and I emptied my car, and I'm just sitting and I was really tired actually. I laid down on my mattress, which was just on the floor, and I took a nap, and there's a banging on my door, and I opened my door, and it's a senior spiritual, I forgot what the title was, but it was like a spiritual advisor. His name was Al. And Al wanted to get to know me, and I'm groggy. Okay, you can pick, and I'm 18, I don't know anything. So he asked if I could talk, and went into my room and all sat around whatever was on the floor, and it's a big mess in there. And I don't know anybody. It's my first day. And right away, he starts to tell me about things that I might want to consider to improve in my own life. And also, he needed my help with some things he has to improve in his life. And he started to open up about some things that they freaked me out. And I was only 18, and I was really tired. That was an awkward conversation. We have to have relationships with people. And I think that makes things challenging sometimes for accountability if there's no relationship. Do you know there's a 7-to-1 compliment rule for every one bad thing? Do you ever have a boss, all they seem to do is say bad things to you? Bad, 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 bad. The really good bosses say 7 good things for every 1 bad thing they say. 7 good for every 1 bad. Or at least decent, maybe not great. I mean, they're not singing false praises. They're not making you sound like a saint. But they say good things. Hey, nice job. Thanks for coming to work. It's good to see you. You look good. So when they give you the one thing that's kind of rough, you've got a baseline relationship that you are also successful. And then there's the spec log concept. You know, people have problems in their own life, and they're trying to tell you how to fix your life with the same problem. You know what I'm talking about? By the way, we know, I recognize, we all know each other here. We know it's okay to judge. We know it's okay to judge. Don't we? It is okay to judge. There's a book in the Bible called Judges. You cannot have accountability without some form of judgment. I just want to be really clear. There is a type of judgment that is okay. The kind of judgment that is not okay is motive judgment. You know, I know why they did that. No, you don't. Jim, I know why you said what you said. No, you don't. Why didn't you ask me why I said what I said? Hopefully I know why I said what I said. Did you ever say anything kind of dumb? We don't know motives. We can't judge motives. But we can sure judge actions. It's the motives that make bad actions sometimes. So this spec log concept, there's a lot of judging. Somebody doesn't recognize they have a problem in their own life, so they're telling somebody else they've done wrong. I'll give you a work example I had. There was a fairly high-level employee, and I'm actually going to give you a name. First service, I didn't give a name, and I think it made this story confusing. Colleen. There's a lot of Colleens at my company, so please don't guess which Colleen if you ever know her. So Colleen was a fairly high-level employee, and before I had started the company, she got the team that I was later hired on, and she had the team around in a room, and she said, look, I know you're all unhappy about something, this thing that had gone wrong. So my job is to come into this team today and to get information from you why you're unhappy. And it's going to be confidential. It's going to stay in the room. Okay? And the team just gushed on her. They gave her all these reasons why they were unhappy. And she left. Then I started the company, and I'm in a team meeting a couple months later after that. And this higher up came in the room and said, well, I know what you all think. I know how unhappy you were because... And she started to say all those confidential things that the team had told Colleen. Colleen had left and didn't keep them confidential. She told this higher up. So when the higher up came in the room and she pointed at people, well, I know what you said, and I know what you said, and I know what you said, and I know what you said. She totally blew that confidentiality. Sometime later, I was on a project, and Colleen said, well, Jim, I'll work with you on your confidential project. I don't think so. Sometimes people have an issue in their own life, like Matthew talks about. They need to get rid of the issue before they try to correct somebody else's same issue. It can make accountability very difficult. So this is it. This message, believe it or not, is not on straight accountability. There's a broader understanding I want to look at today. But accountability is most critical for us. All right, so one of the most prolific or best known accountability examples in the scriptures, let's look at it. Then, as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, David is a young man, he just kills Goliath. It's important. This is a big stepping out moment for David. A big stepping out moment for David. The slaughter from the Philistine. Abner took him and brought him before Saul, the king, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. So I just picture this young guy, not even 18 years old. He's just a young guy. He's carrying this giant head of somebody who just killed he knocked him down with a slingshot, chopped off his own head with his own weapon, Goliath's head with his own weapon, and he's toting this head around, and he makes it before the king. And the king said, whose son are you, young man? So David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. So there you go. There's a proper introduction. Here's David carrying his head. And while this is going on, we keep reading. Now it starts a new chapter, but I want to say it's the same story. It's just a new chapter. Go ahead. Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, David, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let David go home to his father's house anymore. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant. because he loved him as his own soul. So Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. So thus starts an accountability relationship. But look how it began. It began at a time where David stepped out into something new. If there's going to be, and this is really what I want to start to get to today, if we have something new in our life as believers, and again, this is a believer's crowd here. I know you. This is a believer's crowd. If we're going to step into anything in our life, a new growth in our life, in our gifts that we have in our life, we've got to have an accountability experience. We have to have somebody that we work with. Our home group leader, elders, whatever. But we need people to speak into our life. We really do. If we're going to step out into a new space, we need that accountability experience. David had it with Jonathan. So he goes and he kills Goliath. And he had the growth. He went into Saul's house after that. This is a whole new space. He needed somebody to speak into him. And we know from hindsight that they truly did have a good accountability experience. We also know that the accountability was done in love. It was in love. Let's look at this next slide. Brothers, Galatians 6. If anyone is caught in any transgression, this is a sin accountability now. Not all accountability is, sin is an obvious black and white accountability. A lot of things, we just need people to speak into our life just to kind of help us, coach us through and disciple each other in the difficult seasons. But in this case, there's a sin. If you who are spiritual should restore him to a spirit of gentleness. Keep watching yourself, lest you be too tempted. Lest you too be tempted. There we go. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? Love God, love others. That's the law of Christ. 1 Peter 4:8. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Look, this is such a great phrase. This is a strategic verse. It's very strategic. Look, if somebody offends you, love them and you'll get over it. Don't wait for them to do nice things. Just love them and you'll get over it. That's what it's saying. Love them and you'll get over it. Don't wait for the nice things to happen. It's a heavy concept, really. You ever known anybody they're so mad at somebody, they're waiting for that person to fix it. But the ownership is on the person to love them. Pretty heavy, right? If we're going to go into new things in our life, if you're going to do it, and if I'm going to do it, we've got to have some accountability. It's got to be based in love. It's a very clear concept. It can't be based in the fist. You really blew it. It can't be faced in the iron hand or the heavy boot or any of these types of expressions. It has to be based in love. It has to be relational. It has to be looking for the good in the other person. Not a tolerance, but it has to be. There has to be. It's really a fundamental thing. If I come to you and if I step in as a pastor in the church and I don't have any accountability to anybody, what do you think is going to happen at the church? So I step in, I have a greater accountability with the elders here than ever before. And they're going to come to me and say, Jim, why did you do that? What were you thinking here? And that's okay. It should be like that. It really should. It needs to be like that. And if you step into a new ministry, you have the same thing. I'll say this with affection. Chris Corby, you did a great job in sound today. I'm going to use you, brother. I think what you're doing is excellent. So Chris is learning how to do sound some time ago. And I walk in and I say, Chris, you're doing a good job in sound. And he said, well, I need input. Give me input so I can be better. He's looking for accountability, isn't he? He's looking for it. When somebody starts a ministry, they don't want any accountability. But what about the gifts of the Spirit? There has to be accountability. We have to have accountability one to another. Based in what? Love. Based in relationship. I didn't say this at first service, but I'll say this now. This is the director's version. Jonathan gave him his robe, didn't he? Jonathan gave him the best that he had. You know the bow, when Jonathan gave David the bow, Jonathan was known for his bowmanship. He was quite an archer. He didn't just give David some stuff. He gave him his rank of office and the robe. He gave him his sword. He gave him his bow. And he strips down to his girdle. He really exposed himself. There's an accountability lesson just in that, isn't there? Any move forward we have, we've got to be ready with accountability. We've had a wave of visitors coming lately, and I'm very excited to see them come in. I talked to a number after first service today. I'm just sharing because it's us, because we're Graceites in here. And I was talking to them after several of them after first service, and some people who, there was another group, we just had a rivet class on Tuesday. Phil, we had a rivet class on Tuesday. Some folks asked me when our next one's going to be. And I said, hey, you missed it. It's going to be next July. No, we've got to have another one now. So anyhow, I'm talking, these are good things, and I'm thinking, when we have people who stepping into ministry, new people stepping in, they're going to have to learn, right? But what all of us who have been here for a long time, we have to be sensitive and accountable to each other as well. And I mean an appropriate accountability. I'm not talking about people saying what we can wear or watch or that legalistic stuff. You understand what I'm talking about, right? And again, this is a Graceite crowd. I know you know. But accountability based on these things is necessary for us to move forward. Alan Ross, we love Alan Ross. If Alan would come in here and say what he says, he's a speaker. Grace, if Alan would come in and say what he says, if he's wrong, I'm going to tell him. He's accountable to me in this house. I'm accountable to the elders in this house. During worship, I'm accountable to what the musicians do in this house. I'm not on stage. I'm accountable right now to what's happening in Sunday school. I don't know what's going on in there. I'm accountable to the vision that God's given Celeste, but Celeste is accountable then back with her vision. So there's this circle of healthy accountability. And we do things in love. Isn't it great? Could you imagine moving forward without any accountability in your life? Willy-nilly. Just making it up. So the key to the accountability, though, it's love. And we've been bobbing around this now for some time. Our messy lives, us needing each other and needing the perspective from the others. But it's all based in love. We can have nothing good in our life without love. We can't operate in the gifts if they're not centered in love. We can't operate in the gifts if we're not accountable to each other based in love. Agape, 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 agape. I think we got somewhere, I'm going to say 1,100 years of a lot of anger in the community of Christ. A lot of judgment. Somebody recently told me why it's so important for us to be part of a denomination. Why denominations are so good. We're not part of a denomination. We do have an accountability, but we're not part of a denomination. And they were trying to convince me why it was so good. And they said, Jim, you don't understand. If something goes wrong in the congregation, the denomination can come in and fix it. And I was thinking, and actually I said this, how many splits within the Lutheran denomination are there? How many splits within the Baptist denomination are there? How many splits within you get the idea, right? We can go to these different denominations that have splits, and splits occur when people aren't accountable to each other. I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to go start my own thing. I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to go start my own thing. That's not accountability. That's disagreement. Accountability, we work it out. We figure it out together. We're patient with each other. We love each other. We're in relationship with each other. We don't do this with each other. Amen? Okay, I'll tell you a terrible story. Let's stop recording. We got first service, right? Let's not record this.